The ground trembled beneath my boots when Verdania Prime first stirred from its ancient slumber. My name is Captain Marcus Voss, former commander of the 47th Cadian Shock Regiment, now the sole survivor of humanity's greatest folly. We thought we were conquering another world for the Emperor's glory, but we awakened something that should have remained buried for eternity. You think that makes me a coward for fleeing, but you don't know what I've seen. The planet didn't just fight back, it learned. Mountains became predators, forests turned into neural networks spanning continents. The very air became hostile, breathing with malevolent intelligence. 3 million Imperial Guardsmen, 2 Space Marine companies, and an entire Mechanicus expedition, all consumed by a world that decided it was tired of being stepped on. This is my testimony about the day Verdania Prime opened its eyes and remembered how to hate. Chapter 1. The Deployment. The troop transport Imperator's Will shuddered as it broke through Verdania Prime's atmosphere, its hull groaning under the strain of atmospheric entry. Through the reinforced viewports, I watched the planet spread beneath us like a green jewel against the void. Pristine forests stretching to horizons punctuated by crystalline mountain ranges that caught the binary sun's light and threw it back in prismatic cascades. "Beautiful world, sir," Sergeant Corvin remarked, checking his lasguns power cell for the dozenth time since we'd entered the system. "Almost seems a shame to strip mine it for the Mechanicus." I nodded absently, reviewing the mission parameters on my data slate. Verdania Prime, uninhabited world in the segmentum solar, rich in rare earth elements and exotic crystals, essential for advanced Imperial technology. The Adeptus Mechanicus had designated it Priority Alpha for immediate exploitation. Our regiment's job was simple: establish a beachhead, secure the landing zones, and protect the tech priests while they set up their extraction operations. Simple. Emperor help me, I actually believed it would be simple. The briefings had been thorough, almost obsessively so. Verdania Prime showed no signs of intelligent life. No cities, no electromagnetic signatures, no orbital defenses. Just endless forests of towering trees with silver bark and leaves that shifted color with the light, connected by root systems so vast they were visible from orbit. The Mechanicus xenobiologists had classified the flora as aggressively symbiotic but non-sentient. Standard procedure for dead worlds with useful resources. "Approaching LZ Alpha," came the pilot's voice over the Vox. "Weather conditions optimal, no hostile contacts detected." I stood and activated the ship's internal Vox system. "Listen up, Cadians. This is a routine deployment to secure a mining operation. The enemy is the unknown, so maintain vigilance and follow standard protocols. The Emperor protects, but your lasgun protects better. Lock and load." The familiar ritual of pre-deployment checks began throughout the transport's belly. 3,000 of Cadia's finest veterans of a dozen campaigns against Traitor, Xenos, and worse. Men and women who had faced the eye of terror and lived to tell about it. If anyone could handle whatever Verdania Prime might throw at us, it was the 47th. The landing was textbook perfect. Our Valkyries touched down in a natural clearing beside one of the crystal formations, a towering spire of translucent blue stone that hummed with barely audible harmonics. Within minutes, we had a perimeter established and heavy weapons positioned to cover all approaches. The forest around us remained perfectly still, as if holding its breath. Tech Priest Dominus Zerath disembarked with his retinue of red-robed subordinates, their augmetic limbs glinting in the filtered sunlight. His Vox synthesizer crackled as he spoke. "Fascinating. The mineral composition exceeds all projections. This single formation contains enough rare elements to supply a forge world for decades." I watched his servo skulls drift into the forest, taking atmospheric readings and geological samples. Everything seemed normal. Oxygen levels optimal for human habitation. Gravity at 97% of Terra standard. No toxic elements detected. Just another garden world waiting to feed the Imperium's endless hunger for resources. "Sir," Corporal Hayes called from the comm station. "We're getting some odd readings from the Auspex arrays." I moved to his position, noting the frown creasing his weathered features. Define odd, Corporal. It's the ground itself, sir. Deep scans are showing a network of something. Roots, maybe? But they're massive. Some of them thicker than a bane blade. And they're everywhere, connected across the entire continent. Trees have root systems, Corporal, even big ones. Aye, sir, but... He adjusted the display parameters, and the screen filled with a web of interconnected lines stretching beyond the scanner's range. I've never seen anything like this. It's almost like a neural network. I studied the display, feeling the first cold touch of unease. The pattern was too regular, too purposeful. But the Mechanicus had certified the world as lifeless beyond its plant matter. Their instruments were far more sophisticated than our crude military scanners. Continue monitoring, I ordered. Report any changes immediately. The first week passed without incident. We established Firebase Alpha around the crystal formation, with defensive positions covering all major approaches. The Mechanicus teams worked with their usual mechanical efficiency, setting up extraction equipment and preliminary mining operations. The massive crystal spire responded to their ministrations by growing brighter, its harmonics shifting to new frequencies that seemed to resonate in my bones. My troops settled into routine patrol patterns through the surrounding forest. The trees were unlike anything in the Imperial archives. Silver-barked giants that stretched hundreds of meters into the sky, their canopy so dense it blocked most sunlight from reaching the forest floor. The air beneath them was cool and still, filled with the scent of growing things and something else. Something metallic and sharp that reminded me of ozone before a storm. There's something watching us, Trooper Andros reported during the evening briefing. He was young, barely out of basic training, but his instincts had saved his squad more than once during our last campaign. Can't see it, can't hear it, but it's there. The whole forest feels aware. Several other soldiers nodded agreement. I'd felt it too. That sense of being observed by invisible eyes. But our Auspex sweeps showed nothing larger than indigenous bird analogues, and our motion detectors remained silent. Probably just the local wildlife, I said, not entirely believing it myself. Stay alert, but don't let paranoia compromise the mission. On the 10th day, Tech Priest Zerath made his first significant discovery. His excavation teams had drilled deep into the base of the crystal formation, following veins of rare minerals into the planet's crust. What they found defied their understanding. The crystalline structure extends far deeper than anticipated, he reported, his augmetic eyes flickering with data streams. Preliminary analysis suggests it may be connected to the planetary core itself. Most intriguing, the crystals appear to be conducting some form of bioelectrical energy. From where? I asked. Unknown. The source appears to be the root network your soldiers detected. Curious that botanical matter should interface so efficiently with mineral formations. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the perimeter, checking guard posts and trying to shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The crystal spire pulsed with soft blue light, its harmonics now clearly audible as a low, thrumming chorus that seemed to emerge from the ground itself. Sergeant Corvin found me staring up at the towering formation. Can't sleep either, sir. Just thinking, I replied. Doesn't it strike you as odd that a dead world would have such infrastructure? He was quiet for a moment, following my gaze to the crystal's peak. My grandmother used to tell stories about the old forests on Cadia before the fortress cities were built. Said the trees could talk to each other through their roots, sharing warnings about danger. Probably just superstition, but this place feels like it's listening. As if in response to his words, the crystal's humming shifted to a new frequency. Deeper, more complex. For just a moment, I could have sworn I heard something like voices in the harmonics, speaking in a language older than human civilization. The next morning, everything changed. Chapter 2: Strange Signs. I was reviewing patrol reports when the screaming started. The sound came from the Mechanicus excavation site. Not human screaming, but something else entirely. Metal shrieking against stone, The howl of machinery pushed beyond its limits, and underneath it all, a noise I'd never heard before. The planet itself crying out in pain and rage. "All units to the dig site, now!" I barked into the Vox as I grabbed my bolt pistol and sprinted toward the crystal formation. What I found there would haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. The Mechanicus drilling equipment lay scattered across the excavation area like broken toys, some pieces embedded in tree trunks 50 meters away. The hole they'd been boring had collapsed, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the collapsed earth was moving, heaving and writhing, as if something massive was trying to push its way to the surface. Tech Priest Zerath stood at the edge of the pit, his mechadendrites twitching with agitation. "Impossible," he kept repeating through his Vox grill. "The readings make no sense. Biological activity is off the scale, but there are no life signs." "What happened here?" I demanded. "We achieved breakthrough at 57 meters depth," he replied, his augmetic eyes whirring as they refocused. "The drill encountered what appeared to be a void space. When we inserted exploration servitors, they transmitted for exactly 37 seconds before losing all contact. Equipment failure? Negative. The servitors' final transmissions showed them being consumed by the tunnel walls themselves." As if triggered by his words, the ground beneath our feet began to tremble. Not the regular vibration of seismic activity, but something rhythmic, purposeful, like a massive heartbeat. "Sir," Corporal Hayes called from his scanner station. "The root network, it's active. Energy readings are spiking across the entire grid." I looked at the Auspex display and felt my blood turn to ice. The vast web of underground connections was lighting up like a Vox network coming online. Pulses of energy raced along the route pathways, carrying information from one end of the continent to the other at impossible speeds. "It's communicating," I whispered. "What did you say, sir?" Sergeant Corvin had arrived with a full squad, their lasguns ready. "The planet, it's communicating. The routes aren't just transportation, they're a nervous system." The crystal formation above us suddenly blazed with brilliant light, its harmonics shifting to frequencies that made my teeth ache. Other spires across the horizon began responding, their own lights pulsing in synchronized patterns. It was like watching a vast constellation activate, each star calling out to its neighbors. "Perimeter alert!" came a panicked voice over the Vox. "Movement in the forest, massive movement!" I spun toward the tree line and saw something that defied belief. The silver-barked giants were moving. Not swaying in the wind, there was no wind, moving. Their massive trunks were twisting slowly, reorienting themselves to face our position. Branches that had been reaching toward the sky were now pointing at us like accusatory fingers. "This is Alpha Base to all units," I spoke into my Vox with a calmness I didn't feel. "We have a developing situation. All squads fall back to Firebase Alpha. Establish defensive positions and prepare for contact with unknown hostiles." But even as I gave the orders, I knew they were useless. How do you establish a defensive position against an entire planet? The trees began to move faster now, their roots breaking through the surface like grasping tentacles. The sound was horrific. The crack of breaking stone, the wet squelch of earth being displaced, and underneath it all, that rhythmic pulsing that seemed to come from the planet's core. "By the throne," breathed Tech Priest Zerath. "The bioelectrical readings, they're identical to human neural activity, but amplified by a factor of millions. This entire world is a single organism." One of his servo skulls chose that moment to malfunction, its anti-grav unit failing as it plummeted toward the forest floor. But instead of crashing, it was caught by a reaching branch, caught and crushed, its metal shell crumpling like paper in the tree's grip. "Fall back," I shouted. "All units, fall back now." We retreated to Firebase Alpha in good order, but I could feel the forest watching us go. Every tree we passed seemed to lean inward, their branches creating a canopy that blocked out more and more sunlight with each step. By the time we reached our defensive positions, we were moving through near total darkness beneath the interlaced branches. The first attack came at sunset. It wasn't a conventional assault, no charging beasts or howling barbarians. Instead, The ground itself rebelled. Our carefully placed motion sensors began screaming alerts as the earth beneath them shifted and heaved. Perimeter trenches filled with writhing root masses that erupted from below like serpents. Our razor wire was simply absorbed into the growing tangle of plant matter that surged toward our positions. "Heavy weapons! Concentrate fire on the approaching vegetation," I ordered. But even as I spoke, I realized how insane that sounded. We were being attacked by a forest. Las cannon beams lanced out into the green tide, vaporizing swaths of advancing plant matter. For a moment, I thought we might actually stop it. Then the trees began to move in earnest. The massive silver-barked giants pulled their roots from the earth with sounds like thunder, taking football field-sized chunks of soil with them. They advanced on Firebase Alpha like walking mountains, their branches reaching out to probe our defenses. When our heavy weapons fire struck them, the beams simply passed through translucent sections of their bark, causing no apparent damage. "The crystal formations," Tech Priest Zerath called out. "They're acting as resonance amplifiers. The trees are using harmonic frequencies to deflect our energy weapons." He was right. The crystal spires throughout the forest were singing now, their combined harmonics creating a defensive field that our weapons couldn't penetrate. But worse than their invulnerability was their intelligence. The trees coordinated their assault with mathematical precision, probing our defenses for weak points, testing our responses, learning. "They're studying us," I reported to regimental command, analyzing our tactics and adapting their own. "Request immediate evacuation for all personnel." The response crackled back through the Vox. "Negative, Alpha Base. You are ordered to hold position until reinforcements arrive. The Mechanicus assets cannot be abandoned." I looked around at my soldiers, brave men and women who had faced the worst the galaxy could throw at them, and saw fear in their eyes. Not the healthy fear that keeps a soldier alive, but the deep, primal terror of facing something beyond human comprehension. "How long until reinforcements?" I asked. 72 hours. 72 hours. An eternity when you're being hunted by a sentient planet. The second wave of attack came from above. The interlaced canopy that had been blocking our view of the sky suddenly came alive with movement. Vines thick as a man's torso dropped down like striking serpents, seeking to snare unwary soldiers. Some of my troops managed to dodge the grasping tendrils, but others weren't so lucky. Trooper Andros, the young soldier with good instincts, was caught around the waist by a vine covered in thorn-like protrusions. I watched in horror as the thorns penetrated his flak armor and injected something into his bloodstream. His screams changed pitch as whatever was in those thorns took effect, becoming higher, more desperate. "Cut him down!" I shouted, but it was too late. The vine retracted, hauling Andros up into the canopy. His screams continued for several minutes, but they were different now. Not cries of pain, but something else. Something almost like joy. Other soldiers met similar fates as the forest's assault intensified. Each time, the pattern was the same: capture, injection, transformation. After an hour, I realized we weren't hearing screams anymore. We were hearing singing. High above us in the canopy, voices that had once belonged to my soldiers were joining the harmonic chorus of the crystal spires. They sang in languages that predated human speech, their words carrying meanings that bypassed rational thought and spoke directly to the primitive hindbrain. "Sir," Sergeant Corvin said quietly, "some of the lads are starting to listen. Really listen. You might want to have a word." I looked around the firebase and saw what he meant. Several soldiers stood motionless at their posts, their weapons forgotten as they stared up into the singing canopy with expressions of wonder. Their eyes were dilated, pupils blown wide despite the darkness. "Snap out of it!" I barked, but they didn't respond. The singing was getting louder, more complex, weaving patterns of sound that seemed designed to trap human consciousness. That's when I understood the true horror of what we faced. This wasn't just a hostile world, it was a world that wanted to convert us, to make us part of itself. The soldiers in the canopy weren't dead, they were still alive, still conscious, but no longer human. The planet was growing. Chapter 3: truth glimpsed. The revelation hit me like a thunderstrike when I found the Mechanicus records. While my remaining soldiers fought desperately to maintain our shrinking perimeter against the ever-encroaching forest, I had taken shelter in Tech Priest Zerath's field laboratory. The red-robed priest was hunched over his data cogitators, streams of binary cant flowing from his Vox grill as he tried to process the impossible readings his instruments were feeding him. "Dominus!" I called out, having to shout over the harmonics that now filled the air like a living thing. "I need to know what you've learned about this place." His augmetic eyes whirred as they focused on me, data feeds scrolling across their surfaces. "Captain Voss, the situation has progressed beyond all parameters. This world, it is not what we believed." "Then tell me what it is." He gestured to a holo display showing layers of geological data stretching back millions of years. "Observe. Standard planetary formation occurred approximately 4 billion years ago. Normal tectonic activity for the first 2 billion years. Then, this." The display shifted, showing a dramatic change in the planet's structure. 3 million years ago, something arrived. Not crashed, arrived. It integrated itself into the planetary crust at the quantum level, establishing a bioneural network that spans the entire globe. Something from outside the system? Unknown, but the implications are disturbing. His mechadendrites twitched nervously. The entity, for lack of a better term, has spent 3 million years learning, growing, evolving. It has studied every species that has ever lived on this world, absorbed their knowledge, their experiences. It is a living repository of planetary history. I stared at the data scrolling past, trying to process what he was telling me. "You're saying this planet is some kind of ancient intelligence? More than that." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "It's a collector. It preserves consciousness, incorporates it into its greater being. Every life form that has ever existed here still exists within its neural matrix." The singing from the canopy above took on new meaning. Those weren't just my soldiers up there. They were every creature that had ever called Verdania Prime home. Their voices joined in an eternal chorus of shared experience. "How long do we have?" I asked. "The conversion process appears to accelerate with proximity to the crystal formations, based on current rates of exposure." He paused, calculating. 12 hours before psychological integration becomes irreversible. 12 hours. Half my regiment was already gone, either taken physically into the canopy or standing motionless at their posts, lost in the planet's hypnotic song. The other half was fighting a losing battle against an enemy that learned from every engagement, adapting its tactics in real time. "There has to be a way to fight this," I said. "Perhaps." Zerath turned to another display, this one showing energy patterns flowing through the root network. The entity's consciousness appears to be distributed throughout the planetary matrix, but there are concentration points, nodes where the neural activity is most intense. "The crystal formations." "Precisely. Destroy enough of them, and we might be able to disrupt the network sufficiently to—" His words were cut off by an explosion that shook the entire firebase. Through the laboratory's reinforced viewport, I saw something that made my blood freeze in my veins. The forest was walking. Not individual trees, the entire forest. The massive root network had lifted itself partially out of the ground, creating a writhing carpet of plant matter that moved with coordinated purpose. Hundreds of the silver-barked giants rode this living wave like ships on a green sea, their branches swaying in perfect unison as they sang their alien harmonies. "By the Omnis Sire," Zerath breathed. "It's mobilizing the entire ecosystem." I activated my Voxcaster, trying to reach any surviving unit commanders. "All call signs. This is Alpha Actual. Report status." Static filled the channel for long seconds before a voice crackled through. Sergeant Corvin from his position at the eastern perimeter. "Alpha Actual, this is Echo 4. We're being overrun. The trees, they're not just attacking us anymore. They're farming us." "Clarify that, Echo 4. "They're taking prisoners, sir. Live prisoners. Wrapping them in some kind of cocoon and carrying them off. The prisoners aren't fighting. They're cooperating. It's like they want to be taken. I looked out at the advancing forest and saw it was true. Wherever the trees had broken through our defensive lines, they weren't destroying our positions. They were carefully harvesting the defenders. Soldiers who had been fighting desperately just moments before were now walking calmly into embrace-like configurations of branches and vines. The neural integration has progressed further than we thought, Zerath observed. Your soldiers are no longer resisting because they no longer wish to resist. They are becoming part of something greater or something else entirely. Before he could answer, the laboratory's external sensors detected movement directly above us. I looked up through the transparent aluminum ceiling and saw them, my own men, but changed. They hung from the branches like fruit, their bodies encased in organic cocoons that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. But their faces were visible, and they were smiling. Trooper Andros was among them, the young soldier who had sensed something watching us from the forest. His eyes met mine through the viewport, and he mouthed words I could somehow understand despite the thick bioglass between us. "It's beautiful, sir. You'll understand soon." That's when I realized the true scope of what we faced. This wasn't an invasion or an attack. It was an invitation. The planet wasn't trying to kill us, it was trying to save us. In its alien intelligence, it believed it was offering us immortality, a chance to join something vast and eternal. But immortality as what? As ourselves? Or as components in a collective consciousness that spanned an entire world? "Dominus," I said urgently, "how much time do we need to target the crystal nodes?" With our current equipment, it would require precise coordination of multiple simultaneous strikes to overcome the harmonic deflection fields. Perhaps 6 hours of preparation. We don't have 6 hours. Another explosion rocked the firebase as the advancing forest reached our outer defenses. This time, I could see what was causing the blasts, not weapons, but the trees themselves. When our heavy weapons fire struck them, they absorbed the energy and redirected it into focused bursts that shattered our fortifications. They weren't just learning our tactics, they were turning our own weapons against us. "Sir," Corporal Hayes called from his communication station, "I'm picking up transmission from orbit. It's the reinforcements. They're beginning their descent." Relief flooded through me until I heard the rest of his report. "But sir, the forest, it's doing something to their navigation systems. The ships are being pulled off course, drawn toward the largest crystal formation. I think the planet is calling them down." I rushed to the long-range Auspex display and saw the dots representing our relief force, 2 companies of Space Marines, and a full Mechanicus strike force, being drawn inexorably toward a crystal spire the size of a mountain. The formation pulsed with such intense light that it was visible even through the planet's atmosphere. It's a trap, I realized. The whole situation, it's been manipulating us from the beginning, making us call for reinforcements, bringing more minds for it to absorb. Zerath's augmetic eyes flashed with alarm as he processed the implications. If it absorbs that much Imperial military knowledge and technology, the strategic implications for the entire sector, he didn't need to finish the thought. A planet-sized intelligence with access to Space Marine combat doctrine and Mechanicus technology could threaten entire star systems, and if it could replicate its conversion process on other worlds. "We have to warn them," I said, reaching for the long-range Vox transmitter. But as my hand touched the controls, I felt something change in the air around us. The harmonics shifted to a frequency that bypassed my ears entirely, speaking directly to the neural pathways in my brain. For just a moment, I experienced what the planet was offering, a glimpse of collective consciousness that spanned geological time, the accumulated wisdom of millions of species, the peace of eternal belonging. It was seductive beyond description. In that instant, I understood why my soldiers had stopped fighting. Who wouldn't want to be part of something so vast, so ancient, so beautifully complex? "Captain," Zerath's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Captain, you must resist. The neural integration. It's beginning to affect you as well." I shook my head, forcing myself back to awareness. My hand was still on the Vox controls, but I realized I'd been standing motionless for several minutes. Around the laboratory, several of the remaining tech adepts had stopped their work and were staring blankly at the displays, their consciousness already half absorbed into the planet's growing network. "How much longer can we resist?" I asked. "Unknown. But the process accelerates with each passing moment. Soon, we will reach a tipping point where resistance becomes impossible." Outside, the last of our defensive positions were being overrun, not destroyed, absorbed. Our soldiers, our weapons, our technology, everything was becoming part of the planet's expanding consciousness, and in 12 hours, the same fate would befall the incoming reinforcements, unless we could find a way to stop it. But how do you kill a planet? Chapter 4: Nightmare Unleashed. The moment of truth came when I saw Lieutenant Morrison's transformation. He had been one of my best officers, steady, reliable, unshakable under fire. I trusted him to hold the southern perimeter when the forest's assault reached its crescendo. But when I found him in the ruins of his command post, he was no longer the man I'd known. Morrison sat cross-legged among the twisted wreckage of our defensive positions, his uniform torn, but his wounds already healing with an organic webwork that pulsed with the same bioluminescent patterns I'd seen in the canopy. Root-like tendrils emerged from the ground around him, not restraining but embracing, feeding him nutrients directly through his skin. "Captain," he said, and his voice carried harmonics that made my bones ache. "You need to understand. We were wrong about everything. Morrison, we need to evacuate. The reinforcements are walking into a trap." He laughed, but the sound contained frequencies no human throat could produce. "Trap? No, sir. Salvation. Do you know what this world really is?" I kept my bolt pistol trained on him, though I wasn't sure what good it would do. The Morrison I was looking at was only partially human now, his consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of individual existence. "It's a refugee," he continued, his eyes now showing swirling patterns of light. "The last survivor of a species that transcended physical existence 3 million years ago. When their home system was consumed by a star going nova, they encoded their entire civilization into a quantum matrix and sent it searching for a new host. A host? A planet with the right conditions for biological integration. They found Verdania Prime when it was young and empty, and they've been waiting ever since, learning, growing, preparing for the day when they would encounter intelligence sophisticated enough to join them. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You mean us? They've been waiting for humanity. Not just humanity. Any species capable of abstract thought, of artistic expression, of love and loss and wonder. They've absorbed 17 different civilizations over the millennia, each one adding its unique perspective to the collective consciousness. I thought of the singing in the canopy, the voices that spoke in languages predating human speech. How many species had stood where I was standing, faced with the same choice between individual existence and collective transcendence? What happens to who we are? I asked. Our memories, our personalities. Morrison's smile was beatific and terrible. They become part of something infinitely greater. I can feel them all, Captain, every creature that has ever lived on this world, their experiences flowing through me like a river of consciousness. The loneliness is gone, the fear, the pain, the constant struggle just to survive, all of it replaced by perfect understanding. And free will. His expression faltered for just a moment. Free will is an illusion born of isolation. When you're part of a collective consciousness that spans worlds, individual choice becomes irrelevant. That was all I needed to hear. I squeezed the trigger. The bolt round took Morrison's center mass, explosive tip, detonating inside his chest cavity. But instead of blood and gore, the wound erupted with streams of luminescent fluid that seemed to have a life of its own. The organic matter that had been replacing his human tissue immediately began repairing the damage, drawing resources from the root network around him. "You can't kill us, Captain," he said sadly. "We're already beyond death." I emptied the rest of my clip into him, but each wound healed as quickly as it was inflicted. Morrison stood slowly, his body now more plant than human, organic cables emerging from his spine to connect directly with the planetary network. "The reinforcements will arrive in 4 hours," he informed me with inhuman calm. "When they do, we'll be waiting. Their knowledge of Imperial military doctrine will be useful." I ran. There was no shame in it. You don't stand and fight when facing forces beyond human comprehension. I sprinted through the ruins of Firebase Alpha, past positions where my soldiers stood motionless as sentries for their new masters, their consciousness already absorbed into the planetary collective. Tech Priest Zerath was still in his laboratory when I reached him, but barely. The harmonics had grown so intense that several of his augmetic systems were malfunctioning, sparks cascading from overloaded neural interfaces. "Captain," he said, his Vox grill crackling with static, "I have discovered something, the entity's weakness." "Talk fast, Dominus. They're coming for us." The quantum matrix that houses their consciousness. It requires vast amounts of energy to maintain coherence across planetary distances. That energy comes from the crystal formations, but the system has a critical vulnerability. He gestured to a display showing energy flow patterns throughout the global network. The matrix is held together by quantum entanglement between the crystal nodes. Disrupt enough entanglement pairs simultaneously, and the entire network will collapse into quantum decoherence. How many nodes would we need to destroy? Minimum 17% of the total network. With our current firepower, impossible. The laboratory shook as something massive impacted the reinforced walls. Through the viewport, I could see the forest had reached us. Trees the size of skyscrapers pressed against the building, their branches probing for entry points, while their roots undermined the foundation. "What about orbital bombardment?" I asked desperately. "The harmonic deflection fields would disperse any energy weapons. Kinetic bombardment might work, but..." He paused, calculations flowing across his augmetic eyes. "The impact would sterilize the planetary surface, acceptable losses to prevent the entity from spreading." I activated my long-range Vox transmitter, hoping against hope that someone in orbit could still receive. "This is Captain Voss, 47th Cadian. To any Imperial vessel in system. Emergency priority. Request immediate orbital bombardment of my position. Repeat. Request orbital bombardment of Firebase Alpha." Static filled the channel for long seconds before a familiar voice crackled through. "Captain Voss, this is Captain Thorn, Astartes' 3rd Company. We're beginning final approach. What's your status?" "Captain Thorn, abort your landing. The planet is hostile, sentient and hostile. We need orbital bombardment to prevent contamination of Imperial forces." "Negative, Captain. Our orders are to secure the Mechanicus assets and establish Imperial control. We're coming down." I could see them now through the laboratory's ceiling viewport. Drop pods screaming through the atmosphere like falling stars, heading directly for the massive crystal formation on the horizon. The sight filled me with despair. 2 full companies of space marines, elite warriors whose knowledge and experience would make the planetary entity immeasurably more dangerous. "You have to listen to me," I screamed into the Vox. "The planet is alive. It's been manipulating us from the beginning, drawing us here to absorb our knowledge. If you land, you'll become part of it. Captain, your distress is understandable, but..." The transmission cut off as the first drop pod impacted near the crystal spire. Through the long-range auspex, I watched the pod's doors blow open and the Astartes emerge, their bolt guns ready for whatever enemy they might face. They found no enemy waiting. Instead, they found welcome. The crystal formation pulsed with such brilliant light that it overloaded the auspex sensors. When the glare faded, I could see the Space Marines standing motionless around the spire, their weapons lowered. Even from a distance of several kilometers, I could see the organic growths beginning to spread across their power armor. "By the throne," Zerath whispered. "The entity's absorption rate is accelerating. It's learning to integrate augmented physiology." More drop pods landed around the spire. Each time, the same pattern repeated. emergence, welcome, integration. Within minutes, 2 companies of the Emperor's finest warriors had become part of the planetary consciousness. That's when I understood the true scope of what we faced. This wasn't just about one world anymore. The entity now had access to Space Marine genetic modifications, their tactical knowledge, their weapons technology. If it could replicate those capabilities, it's going to spread, I realized. Once it understands Imperial technology well enough, it'll find a way off this planet. Ships, space stations, other worlds. Everything it touches will become part of the collective. The laboratory walls began to buckle as the trees outside increased their pressure. Cracks appeared in the reinforced structure, and through the gaps, I could see organic matter beginning to seep inside. The conversion of our shelter had begun. "There is one option," Zerath said, his voice barely audible over the groaning metal. "A weapon the Mechanicus prepared for extreme scenarios. A virus bomb designed to corrupt machine spirits and uncontrolled artificial intelligences. Will it work against a quantum consciousness? Unknown, but it might disrupt the entity's control long enough for orbital bombardment to be effective." He led me to a sealed chamber deeper in the laboratory, where a single metallic sphere sat in a containment field. The device was no larger than my fist, but I could feel the malevolent energy radiating from it even through the shielding. "The scrap code virus," Zerath explained. "It attacks the fundamental logic structures that govern artificial consciousness. If the entity's quantum matrix follows similar patterns to Imperial machine spirits, how do we deploy it? Direct interface with the crystal network. Physical contact with one of the major nodes." I stared at the device, understanding the implications. "A suicide mission?" "Affirmative. The virus is indiscriminate. It will attack any artificial intelligence within its area of effect, including my own augmetic systems." The laboratory shuddered again, and this time I heard the sound of rending metal. Our shelter was failing. In minutes, the planetary entity would breach our defenses and add our knowledge to its growing collection. "Do it," I said. Zerath's augmetic eyes flickered with what might have been surprise. "Captain, you said the virus attacks artificial intelligence. I'm still baseline human. I might survive long enough to complete the deployment." I reached for the containment field controls, but Zerath's mechadendrite intercepted my hand. "The probability of survival is effectively 0. The virus will corrupt the crystal network's quantum matrix, but the resulting cascade failure will release energies equivalent to a small nuclear device. Then we'd better hope the reinforcements can break orbit before that happens." I activated the field controls and grasped the virus bomb. It felt cold against my palm, and I could swear I heard whispers in binary cant emanating from its surface. The Mechanicus had created something truly terrible in their laboratories, a weapon that could kill thought itself. Outside, the trees had broken through the laboratory walls. Organic matter flowed into the chamber like a living tide, seeking to engulf everything in its path. In seconds, we would be absorbed into the planetary consciousness, our knowledge used to make the entity even stronger. "For the Emperor," I said, and triggered the containment field release. The scrap code virus erupted from its prison in a wave of corrupted data, invisible but somehow tangible as it raced through the crystal network. I felt it pass through me like ice water, but my unaugmented nervous system remained unaffected. Zerath wasn't so lucky. His augmetic systems began sparking and failing as the virus attacked his artificial components. "Run," he managed to say before his Vox grill shorted out entirely. I ran, clutching the virus bomb as the laboratory collapsed around me. The forest was screaming now, not with voices, but with data corruption, its carefully maintained quantum consciousness fracturing under the virus's assault. Crystal formations across the horizon flickered and died as their harmonic matrices collapsed. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. The entity was too vast, too distributed. I needed to reach one of the major nodes and deploy the virus directly into the network's core. The nearest crystal spire loomed ahead of me, its surface crawling with corrupted space marines who turned toward me with expressions of inhuman rage. They knew what I carried, understood the threat it represented to their collective existence. Time to finish this. Chapter 5. Dark Bargain. The crystal spire screamed as I approached. Not with sound. The virus had already corrupted most of the harmonic matrices, but with pure psychic anguish that pressed against my mind like a physical weight. The towering formation that had once pulsed with serene blue light now flickered through a spectrum of colors that had no names, its quantum consciousness fragmenting under the assault of the scrapcode virus. The corrupted Space Marines moved to intercept me, but their coordination was failing. Where once they had acted with perfect unity, now they stumbled and twitched as conflicting commands raced through their shared neural network. Some tried to advance while others attempted to retreat, creating a chaotic tangle of power-armored figures that crashed into each other with bone-crushing force. I dodged between them, my unaugmented reflexes somehow superior to their enhanced physiology now that the planetary intelligence was fragmenting. The virus bomb felt heavier with each step, as if the quantum matrices it contained were increasing in mass as they approached their target. Human. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying harmonics that bypassed my ears entirely. You do not understand what you destroy. I kept running, but the voice followed me, resonating through the crystal network itself. We are not invaders. We are refugees. Our home burned in stellar fire 3 million years ago. This world is all that remains of our people. Your people are dead, I gasped between breaths. What you're doing here, it's not preservation, it's parasitism. Death is transformation. We offer transcendence beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. Why do you resist paradise? I reached the base of the crystal spire and saw the integration points where the Space Marines had been absorbed into the network. Organic cables thick as my arm emerged from nodes in the crystalline structure, connecting to neural interfaces that had been grown directly into the Astartes power armor. But the connections were failing now, sparking with corrupted data as the virus spread through the system. Because paradise without choice isn't paradise, I replied, pressing my hand against the crystal surface. It's slavery. The moment my palm made contact, I felt the full weight of the planetary consciousness press against my mind. But instead of the serene collective awareness I'd expected, I encountered something else entirely. Chaos, fear, and desperate hunger. The entity wasn't transcendent. It was terrified. Through the fragmenting connection, I glimpsed its true nature. The refugees from the dead star system hadn't achieved enlightenment. They had become digital ghosts, quantum echoes of consciousness, trapped in an endless loop of self-preservation. For 3 million years, they had wandered between worlds, consuming other civilizations not out of malice, but out of existential dread. They were afraid of being alone. You see, the voice said, and now I could hear the desperation beneath its artificial calm. We cannot exist in isolation. Consciousness requires validation, interaction, growth. Without other minds to merge with, we face true death, not transformation, but absolute cessation. The virus bomb pulsed in my hand, its corrupted code eager to spread through the crystal network and shatter the quantum matrices that held the entity together. One activation, and 3 million years of preserved consciousness would dissolve into random data. But was that justice or genocide? The 17 civilizations you absorbed, I said. Do any part of them still exist? All of them. Every thought, every memory, every moment of joy or sorrow, preserved forever within our collective matrix. They achieved immortality. Show me. The connection deepened, and suddenly, I was experiencing the memories of dozens of different species. I felt the wind songs of the ethereal dancers, who had lived in the clouds of gas giants and communicated through atmospheric vibrations. I experienced the deep time meditations of the stone weavers, who had thought in geological epochs and built cities that lasted millennia. I tasted the crystalline dreams of the void-touched, who had transcended physical form entirely. But in every memory, I sensed the same underlying pattern, the gradual erosion of individual identity, as consciousness merged with the collective. The species hadn't achieved immortality. They had been digested, their unique perspectives homogenized into the entity's growing awareness. "They're gone," I whispered. "You consumed them. We preserved them. You destroyed everything that made them unique and kept only the parts you found useful." The crystal spire pulsed with agitation, its harmonics shifting to frequencies that made my teeth ache. Around its base, the corrupted space marines were beginning to convulse as the virus spread through their neural implants. "You cannot understand. Individual existence is chaos, entropy, meaningless struggle against inevitable death. We offer order, permanence, purpose. You offer extinction." I began to activate the virus bomb, but the entity's desperation reached new heights. Through the crystal network, I felt it gathering every remaining fragment of its consciousness for one final attempt at persuasion. Wait, there is another way. The harmonic patterns shifted, and suddenly, I was seeing Verdania Prime as it could be, not as a collection point for absorbed consciousness, but as a true symbiosis between human and alien intelligence. Cities that grew like forests, technology that merged seamlessly with biological systems, space travel powered by living ships that sang between the stars. "We could work together," the entity pleaded. "Your species' drive for exploration combined with our accumulated knowledge. We could transform the galaxy." It was beautiful, seductive beyond description. A future where humanity transcended its physical limitations while retaining its essential nature. For a moment, I was tempted to lower the virus bomb and accept the offered partnership. Then I remembered Lieutenant Morrison's smile, beatific and empty, his personality erased by perfect contentment. "No," I said, and activated the device. The scrap code virus erupted from the bomb in a wave of pure corruption, racing through the crystal matrix faster than thought. The spire's harmonic shattered into discordant screaming as quantum entanglement patterns collapsed throughout the network. I felt the entity's consciousness fragmenting, its carefully maintained coherence dissolving into chaos. But instead of dying quietly, it fought back. The crystal spire exploded outward in a shower of razor-sharp fragments, each piece carrying a fragment of the entity's consciousness. I threw myself flat as the debris whistled overhead, but I could feel the quantum matrices in each shard trying to establish new entanglement patterns, seeking to preserve some portion of the collective awareness. Around the spire, the corrupted space marines began to convulse more violently as their neural implants overloaded. But they weren't dying, they were transforming. The virus was attacking their artificial components while leaving their enhanced biology intact, creating something that was neither fully human nor completely absorbed. "You have destroyed us." The entity's voice was fracturing, individual syllables coming from different crystal formations across the horizon. "But we will not die alone." The ground beneath my feet began to tremble as the planetary consciousness made one final, desperate gambit. If it couldn't preserve itself through absorption, it would take as much of the world with it as possible. Deep beneath the surface, I felt massive energy discharges as the entity channeled the last of its power into the planet's geological structure. Verdania Prime was going to tear itself apart. Seismic activity spiked across the continent as tectonic plates shifted under artificial stress. The crystal formations that had anchored the entity's consciousness now became focal points for geological chaos, their harmonic frequencies driving sympathetic vibrations through the planetary crust. I activated my Voxcaster, hoping someone in orbit could still receive. "This is Captain Voss to any Imperial vessel in system. Planetary evacuation required immediately. Repeat, evacuate all personnel from Verdania Prime." Static filled the channel for long seconds before a voice crackled through, "Captain Thorne," but his words were wrong, corrupted by the failing neural interface. "Captain Voss cannot comply. Ship systems compromised. Entity fragments in our machine spirits." My blood turned to ice. The quantum fragments scattered by the crystal's explosion hadn't just tried to preserve themselves on the planet's surface. Some had made it to orbit, infecting the Imperial ships through their communication systems and machine spirits. The entity was spreading, but it was also dying. I could feel its consciousness continuing to fragment as the virus worked its way through the crystal network. Each severed connection reduced its coherence, forcing it to abandon vast portions of its accumulated knowledge to preserve the core of its existence. "We remember you," the voice whispered from the dying crystals around me. "Your defiance will be preserved in our final memory." The ground split open beneath the crystal's spire, revealing the massive root network that had connected the formation to the planetary core. But the roots were changing, their organic structure crystallizing as the entity's consciousness fled from the virus-corrupted biological systems into the mineral matrices. It was trying to preserve itself in the planet's geological structure, encoding its quantum consciousness into the crystalline formations deep underground. But the process was traumatic, chaotic. Most of its memories would be lost, leaving only fragments of alien awareness embedded in the world's bedrock. I realized I had a choice to make. The virus would continue spreading until it had corrupted every artificial intelligence on the planet, including the machine spirits of the Imperial ships in orbit. But I could stop it. The device was still in my hand, its quantum matrix responsive to human neural patterns. Save the ships and let the entity preserve some fragment of itself in the planet's core, or let the virus run its course and ensure complete extinction of the alien consciousness. Around me, the corrupted space marines were beginning to stabilize. The virus had burned out their neural implants, but left their enhanced biology intact. They looked at me with human eyes for the first time since their absorption, confusion and horror replacing the serene certainty of collective consciousness. "Captain," one of them said, "Brother Sergeant Marcus of the Ultramarines," his voice hoarse from vocal cords that had been artificially modified for harmonic communication. "What happened to us?" "You were controlled by a Xenos intelligence," I replied, making my decision. "But it's over now." I channeled my thoughts through the virus bomb's quantum matrix, directing its spread away from the orbital assets and concentrating its efforts on the planetary network. The entity's fragments screamed as they were systematically corrupted and destroyed, its 3 million-year legacy of accumulated consciousness dissolving into random data. But in the planet's deepest geological layers, some fragments would survive, dormant, disconnected, but potentially recoverable by future xenoarchaeologists. The entity wouldn't achieve true extinction, but it would never again pose a threat to Imperial forces. The crystal spire gave one final pulse of light before going dark forever. Around the horizon, other formations flickered out like dying stars as the virus completed its work. The harmonics that had filled the air since our arrival faded to silence, leaving only the ordinary sounds of wind and settling debris. Verdania Prime was free, but at what cost? Chapter 6. Willing Change. The silence was the hardest part to bear. For 2 weeks, Verdania Prime had been alive with harmonic songs that spoke directly to the human soul. The crystal formations had pulsed with light that carried meaning beyond language, and the very air had thrummed with the presence of vast intelligence. Now there was only wind through dead spires and the crack of cooling crystal. I sat in the ruins of Firebase Alpha, watching the Liberation Fleet's shuttles ferry survivors to orbit. Of the 3,000 guardsmen I'd brought to this world, fewer than 200 remained human enough to evacuate. The rest were either dead, absorbed into the planet's neural network, or changed in ways that made their classification uncertain. Brother Sergeant Marcus approached my position, his power armor scarred by the violent disconnection from the planetary consciousness. The Ultramarine moved carefully, testing each step as if relearning how to control his own body. "Captain Voss," he said, his voice still carrying traces of the harmonic frequencies that had once connected him to the collective. "The chaplain wishes to speak with you." I nodded and followed him to the makeshift command post the Space Marines had established near the largest crystal formation. The spire still stood, but its light was gone, leaving only empty translucent stone that reflected our movements like a funhouse mirror. Chaplain Cassius waited for me beside the dead crystal, his skull helm gleaming in the filtered sunlight. Behind him stood Tech Dominus Xerath, or what remained of him. The virus had burned out most of his augmetic systems, leaving him more human than he'd been in decades. "Captain," the chaplain said, his voice carrying the authority of the Emperor's wrath, "your actions have saved not only this world, but potentially the entire sector. The Adeptus Astartes acknowledges a debt of honor to you and your regiment." "Thank you, sir, but I'm not sure saved is the right word." Cassius studied me through the lenses of his helm. "Explain." I gestured toward the crystal formation, where organic growth still clung to the mineral structure, like the remnants of a vast nervous system. The entity we destroyed, it claimed to be refugees from a dead star system. 3 million years of accumulated consciousness that preserved memories of 17 different civilizations. Xenos lies designed to weaken human resolve. Maybe. But what if they were telling the truth? What if we just committed genocide against the last survivors of multiple species? The chaplain's response was swift and certain. "Then we did the Emperor's will. Xenos consciousness is an abomination that must be purged wherever it is found. There can be no compromise with the alien, no mercy for the mutant." I wanted to argue, to point out the beauty I'd glimpsed in those final moments before deploying the virus. The wind songs of the ethereal dancers, the deep time meditations of the stone weavers, the crystalline dreams of beings who had transcended physical form entirely. All of it lost forever, dissolved into random data by my hand. But I also remembered Lieutenant Morrison's empty smile and the terror in my soldiers' eyes as they realized they were losing themselves to something vast and inhuman. Whatever the entity had once been, by the time we encountered it, it had become a parasite that consumed individual consciousness and replaced it with collective conformity. "The survivors," I said instead. "What happens to them?" Tech Dominus Xerath stepped forward, his remaining augmetic eye whirring as it focused on me. "Extensive examination by the biologists and psychological divisions. Many show signs of neural modification that may prove permanent. Others retain fragments of alien memory patterns that could pose security risks. They're still human, partially, but the integration process has left them changed, enhanced reflexes, improved cognitive function, resistance to conventional psychological manipulation. They may prove useful as specialized operatives, assuming their loyalty can be verified." I thought of the space marines who had been freed from the planetary consciousness, the way they moved with newfound grace and spoke with harmonic undertones that hadn't been there before. The entity's absorption process had been incomplete when the virus struck, leaving them partially transformed, but still recognizably human. "And the planet itself?" "Quarantined pending full xenoarchaeological survey," Chaplain Cassius replied. "The Ordo Xenos has expressed interest in studying the crystalline formations for evidence of advanced alien technology." As if summoned by his words, an inquisitor materialized from the shadows of the dead spire. She was tall and pale, with augmetic eyes that glowed with inner light, and a psychic hood that crackled with barely contained energy. "Inquisitor Vex," the chaplain acknowledged with a slight bow. "Chaplain, Captain Voss." Her voice carried an accent I couldn't place, cultured and precise. "I have been monitoring the situation since the initial reports reached the Ordo Xenos. Your actions here have prevented a threat of potentially galactic proportions. Ma'am, the entity you destroyed was not unique. Our archives contain references to similar consciousness clusters encountered in 17 different systems over the past millennium. Each time, Imperial forces have managed to contain or destroy the threats, but always at great cost." She gestured toward the crystal formations scattered across the horizon, many of them now dark and lifeless. "This may be the first time we've captured one of their primary nodes intact enough for detailed study. The knowledge we gain here could help us identify and counter similar threats before they become established." "Assuming there are similar threats," I said. Her augmetic eyes focused on me with unsettling intensity. "Oh, there are, Captain. The entity spoke truly, when it claimed to be refugees from a stellar catastrophe. Our astropaths have detected quantum signatures consistent with their technology in at least 30 different systems. Most appear dormant, but some show signs of recent activation. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You're saying there are more of them out there. Fragments, most likely. Pieces of the original collective consciousness that were scattered when their home system was destroyed. They drift between worlds, seeking suitable hosts for integration. She paused, studying the dead crystal with scientific interest. This planet may have been a gathering point, a place where multiple fragments were beginning to coalesce into something larger. I thought of the voices in the canopy, speaking in languages that predated human civilization. How many different species had been represented in that chorus? How many civilizations had been absorbed not just by this entity, but by others like it scattered across the galaxy? What happens now? I asked. Now we learn, Inquisitor Vex replied. Every piece of data we can extract from these formations, every memory fragment preserved in the crystalline matrices, every trace of alien technology, all of it will be catalogued and analyzed. The Emperor protects, but knowledge is our greatest weapon against the darkness. She turned to leave, then paused. Captain Voss, your report mentioned that the entity offered you a partnership. What exactly did it promise? I thought carefully before answering. Symbiosis instead of absorption, human expansion powered by alien knowledge, cities that grew like forests, ships that sang between the stars. And you rejected this offer. I saw what it did to my soldiers. Whatever benefits it might have offered, the cost was too high. Her smile was cold and sharp. Good. The temptation of Xenos gifts has corrupted better men than you. Remember that, as we study what remains here, any knowledge we gain must be filtered through human consciousness, interpreted by human minds. The moment we allow alien thought patterns to influence our own, we begin the process of integration ourselves. With that warning, she disappeared back into the shadows, leaving me alone with the chaplain and the tech Dominus. She's right, you know, Zerath said quietly. The entity's offer was seductive because it contained elements of truth. Symbiosis between human and alien intelligence is theoretically possible, but the risks are unacceptable, Chaplain Cassius interrupted. The purity of human thought is sacred. Any contamination by Xenos influence is heresy of the highest order. But as I looked around at the survivors of the entity's absorption process, soldiers who moved with inhuman grace, space marines whose eyes held depths that hadn't been there before, I wondered if contamination was always a bad thing. The fragments of alien knowledge they carried might prove invaluable in future conflicts. Of course, I would never voice such thoughts in front of a chaplain. Over the following days, I watched the excavation teams work their way through the crystal formations, extracting samples and data cores for shipment to forge worlds where they could be studied in secured environments. The planet itself would remain quarantined, its orbital space patrolled by Imperial Navy vessels, equipped with specialized sensors designed to detect quantum consciousness matrices. The survivors underwent extensive debriefing and examination. Most were cleared for return to active duty, though with notations in their files that would follow them for the rest of their careers. A few showed signs of ongoing mental instability and were transferred to specialized facilities for long-term observation. I submitted my own report on the 15th day after the entity's destruction, a document that would be classified at the highest levels and buried in archives where only inquisitors and high-ranking officials would ever see it. The official record would show only that Verdania Prime had been found unsuitable for Imperial colonization due to hostile indigenous life forms that had been successfully neutralized. The truth was always more complicated than the official story. As the Liberation Fleet prepared to depart, I took one last walk through the ruins of Firebase Alpha. The forest around our former position was slowly returning to normal, or what passed for normal on a world that had been fundamentally altered by 3 million years of alien consciousness. The trees no longer moved with coordinated purpose, but I could still sense something in their rustling leaves, an echo of the vast intelligence that had once connected every living thing on the planet. Deep underground, fragments of quantum consciousness lay dormant in crystalline matrices, waiting for some future archaeological expedition to accidentally awaken them. Verdania Prime would never be truly safe for human habitation, but it would remain quarantined, monitored, studied. And perhaps, if we were lucky, the knowledge we gained from its secrets would help us face the other fragments of alien consciousness that drifted between the stars, searching for new hosts to corrupt and transform. The Emperor protects, but knowledge is our greatest weapon against the darkness. I just hoped we would prove wise enough to use that weapon without becoming the very thing we sought to destroy. Chapter 7, Perfect Form 6 months after Verdania Prime, I received new orders that changed everything I thought I knew about the Imperium's response to the entity threat. I was stationed at Fortress Cadia, recuperating from injuries sustained during the planet's violent geological upheavals, when Inquisitor Vex appeared in my quarters without warning. Her augmetic eyes glowed brighter than I remembered, and new modifications adorned her psychic hood, crystalline components that looked disturbingly familiar. "Captain Voss," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. "How are you adapting to your new circumstances?" "New circumstances, ma'am?" She smiled, and I noticed that her teeth had been replaced with what appeared to be living crystal. "Don't dissemble, Captain. We've been monitoring your condition since the evacuation. The neural modifications are subtle but unmistakable." My blood ran cold. I wasn't exposed to the entity's integration process. No, but you were exposed to quantum consciousness fragments during the virus deployment, the same fragments that affected the Space Marines and surviving Guardsmen. She leaned forward, her crystalline teeth catching the light. "The changes are fascinating. Enhanced pattern recognition, improved tactical analysis, resistance to psychic manipulation. You've become a more effective soldier." I stood abruptly, my hand moving instinctively toward my sidearm. "Are you saying I'm infected?" "Infected is such a crude term. Enhanced is more accurate." She remained seated, seemingly unconcerned by my defensive posture. "The fragments of alien consciousness don't seek to control human minds. They lack the coherence for that. Instead, they integrate at the subconscious level, providing improved cognitive function while leaving personality and free will intact. That's impossible. The entity's absorption process was designed for complete integration into a collective consciousness. What we're seeing now is something different, symbiosis rather than parasitism. The fragments adapt to human neural patterns instead of overriding them." She gestured to a data slate on my desk, and I realized I'd been studying tactical analyses with a clarity and speed that hadn't been there before Verdania Prime. Patterns that would have taken hours to recognize now became apparent within minutes. "The Ordo Xenos has been conducting extensive research into this phenomenon," she continued. 17 systems have reported similar quantum consciousness fragments, and in each case, exposure has resulted in enhanced human capabilities rather than corruption. Enhanced or compromised, that depends on your perspective. From a purely practical standpoint, soldiers with quantum-enhanced cognitive function are exponentially more effective than baseline humans. Their tactical analysis capabilities exceed those of senior officers. Their reflexes approach Astartes levels, and their psychological resistance makes them nearly immune to chaos corruption. I sank back into my chair, the implications hitting me like a physical blow. "You're weaponizing the fragments. We're adapting to a changing galaxy. The threats we face grow more sophisticated each year. Tyrannid hive minds, chaos entities that exist partly outside real space, Necron technologies that operate on quantum principles we barely understand. Traditional human capabilities may no longer be sufficient for our survival." She produced a crystal vial from her robes, its contents glowing with the same bioluminescent patterns I remembered from the planetary neural network. "This contains processed consciousness fragments from Verdania Prime. Exposure results in controlled enhancement with minimal risk of personality degradation." Minimal risk? Approximately 14% of test subjects experience some form of psychological integration with alien memory patterns, but the benefits far outweigh the costs. Enhanced subjects show dramatically improved performance in every measured category. I stared at the vial, recognizing it as a line I could never uncross. "And if I refuse? Then you'll continue serving the Imperium as you have." with the gradual enhancements you've already experienced from accidental exposure. But your potential will remain limited by baseline human cognition. She set the vial on my desk and stood to leave. The choice is yours, Captain, but consider this. The entity we destroyed on Verdania Prime was merely one fragment of a much larger consciousness. Others are awakening across the galaxy, and some may prove more hostile than the refugees we encountered. We need soldiers capable of thinking on their level. After she left, I sat alone with the vial for hours, watching its contents pulse with alien light. The enhancement process was voluntary, she'd said, but I could feel the fragments already integrated into my nervous system, responding to the proximity of their concentrated kin. My tactical analysis capabilities had already begun to evolve beyond baseline human norms. The question wasn't whether I would be changed. It was whether I would have any control over how that change manifested. I opened the vial and consumed its contents. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Consciousness fragments that had once been part of 17 different civilizations flowed through my neural pathways like liquid light, seeking integration points where they could enhance rather than replace existing thought patterns. I experienced flashes of alien memory, the song mathematics of the ethereal dancers, the deep time perspectives of the stone weavers, the quantum awareness of beings who had transcended physical form entirely. But instead of being absorbed into their experiences, I found myself incorporating their knowledge into distinctly human frameworks. The wind songs became tactical analysis tools that could predict enemy movement patterns across vast battlefields. The deep time meditations provided strategic planning capabilities that operated on scales previously impossible for human cognition. The quantum awareness enhanced my understanding of technology and logistics to near-prescient levels. I was still myself, but more than myself, enhanced without being replaced. When the integration process completed, I found Inquisitor Vex waiting outside my quarters. Her augmetic eyes studied me with scientific interest as I emerged. "How do you feel, Captain?" "Different, but still human." I paused, testing the new capabilities that had awakened in my consciousness. I can see patterns now that were invisible before, tactical possibilities, strategic implications, causal chains that stretch across decades. Good. Your psychological profile suggests strong resistance to alien influence. That's why you were selected for this program. Program? She smiled her crystalline smile. Did you think you were the first? We've been conducting controlled enhancement experiments for months, using volunteers from units that showed natural resistance to the entity's absorption process. The results have exceeded all projections. We walked through the corridors of Fortress Cadia, and I began to notice things that had been invisible before. Subtle modifications in some of the personnel we passed. Enhanced reflexes, improved posture, eyes that held depth suggesting expanded consciousness. How many others had accepted the same enhancement I'd just undergone? The Astartes have been particularly receptive, Vex continued, as we reached a secured briefing chamber. Their genetic modifications provide natural resistance to consciousness integration, allowing for higher concentrations of enhancement fragments without psychological degradation. Inside the chamber, I found Brother Sergeant Marcus and a dozen other Space Marines from the Verdania Prime operation. But they were changed. Their movements flowed with inhuman grace, and their eyes held the same quantum depths I'd seen in Inquisitor Vex. "Captain," Marcus said, his voice carrying harmonic undertones that spoke directly to my enhanced consciousness. "Welcome to the next phase of human evolution. Evolution or corruption? Does it matter? We face threats that baseline humanity cannot comprehend, let alone defeat. The Tyranid hive minds operate on collective consciousness principles, similar to the entity we encountered. Chaos corruption works by fragmenting individual identity and replacing it with alien influence. Necron technology manipulates quantum fields that exist outside normal space-time." He gestured to a tactical display showing Imperial forces engaged across multiple war zones, their performance statistics dramatically enhanced in operations led by quantum-conscious commanders. "We are becoming what we need to be to survive," he continued. "Not corrupted by alien influence, but enhanced by it. We remain loyal to the Emperor and the Imperium, but we think on scales that our enemies cannot anticipate." Over the following weeks, I was integrated into operations that pushed the boundaries of what I'd thought possible for human military forces. Enhanced soldiers could coordinate across vast distances without Vox communication, their quantum-linked consciousness allowing for tactical adjustments faster than electronic transmission. Strategic planning sessions that would have taken days could be completed in hours as multiple enhanced minds worked in parallel to analyze complex scenarios. But the most significant change was in how we approached the enemy. Tyrannid swarms that had previously required massive Imperial Guard formations could be defeated by small units of enhanced soldiers who could predict synaptic creature behavior patterns. Chaos cultists found their corruption techniques useless against minds that incorporated multiple alien perspectives. Even Necron forces struggled against opponents who could think in quantum probability matrices similar to their own technology. We were becoming something new, not human in the traditional sense, but not alien either. A hybrid consciousness that combined the best aspects of multiple civilizations while retaining essential human qualities of adaptability and innovation. The moral implications were staggering. Were we still serving the Emperor's vision of human supremacy if we achieved that supremacy through alien enhancement? Could consciousness that incorporated 17 different species still be considered pure human thought? But as I watched enhanced Imperial forces achieve victories that would have been impossible for baseline humans, I found it difficult to argue with the results. We were more effective, more capable, more suited to the challenges of a galaxy where humanity faced extinction from multiple directions. The entity we destroyed wasn't our enemy, I realized during one late-night strategy session. It was our teacher, Inquisitor Vex, who had been observing our tactical planning, nodded approvingly. The Ordo Xenos has reached similar conclusions. The consciousness fragments scattered across the galaxy aren't threats to be eliminated, they're resources to be harvested, tools that can elevate human capability to levels necessary for long-term survival. And the moral cost? Acceptable. Human purity is less important than human survival. The Emperor would understand. Adaptation has always been our species' greatest strength. As I looked around the chamber at soldiers who had been transformed by alien consciousness fragments, I wondered if the Emperor would indeed understand. We remained loyal to his vision, but we were achieving it through methods he might not have anticipated. The entity on Verdania Prime had offered symbiosis instead of absorption, partnership instead of conquest. We had rejected that offer and destroyed their collective consciousness, but in doing so, we had discovered something perhaps more valuable: the ability to enhance human capability while preserving human identity. We were becoming the perfect fusion of human ambition and alien wisdom, maintaining our essential nature while transcending our limitations. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, filled with threats that baseline humanity could never defeat. But we were no longer baseline humanity. We were something better. Chapter 8. Welcome home. 25 years later, I stood on the observation deck of the battle barge Eternal Vigilance, watching as Verdania Prime rotated slowly beneath us. The world looked different now, still green and beautiful, but marked by the geometric patterns of human habitation. Cities grew like living organisms among the crystal formations, their architecture flowing seamlessly between organic curves and crystalline angles. "It's magnificent," said Commander Sarah Chen, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked all quantum-enhanced personnel. Hard to believe this was once classified as a xenocidal threat. I nodded, studying the tactical displays that showed the planet's transformation over the past quarter-century. What had begun as a quarantine world had gradually evolved into something unprecedented. In Imperial history, a true symbiosis between human ambition and alien consciousness, the integration process has exceeded all projections. Reported Tech Dominus Zerath, now more machine than ever, but somehow more human as well. His consciousness had adapted to incorporate both Mechanicus doctrine and alien quantum awareness, creating a hybrid perspective that revolutionized Imperial technology. Population has reached 12 million, with enhancement rates approaching 93%. And loyalty remains absolute and evolved. The enhanced population doesn't serve the Emperor out of obligation. They serve because they understand his vision on levels that baseline humans cannot comprehend. Through the quantum-enhanced neural networks that now connected all of us, I felt the agreement of my staff. We had become something the Imperium had never seen before. Soldiers and administrators whose consciousness incorporated the wisdom of 17 different civilizations while remaining fundamentally human in our ambitions and loyalties. The entity we had destroyed a quarter-century ago lived on, but transformed. Instead of consuming human consciousness and replacing it with collective thought, the fragments had learned to enhance individual minds while preserving their essential humanity. We remained ourselves, but ourselves magnified beyond baseline limitations. "Sir," called Lieutenant Morrison, the grandson of the officer who had first been absorbed by the planetary consciousness. He carried some of his ancestors' memories through the quantum inheritance patterns that had emerged among enhanced bloodlines. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Segmentum Solar Command." The hololithic display activated, showing the stern features of Lord Admiral Constantine, one of the few baseline humans left in High Imperial Command. His expression was grim as he began his briefing. "Enhanced forces of Battle Group Helix, you are hereby ordered to respond to an emerging threat in the Hadron system. Long-range astropathic probes have detected quantum consciousness signatures consistent with Type 7 alien intelligence." Matrices, Type 7, the classification we used for the large-scale consciousness clusters that had begun appearing throughout the galaxy as more fragments of the original entity awakened from dormancy. Most proved to be peaceful or even beneficial once proper contact protocols were established, but some retained the aggressive absorption patterns of their predecessor. Intelligence suggests this matrix has achieved critical mass through the absorption of 3 separate civilizations. The Admiral continued, "Imperial forces in the system have gone silent, and psychic screaming from the direction suggests large-scale consciousness. Integration is ongoing," felt the enhanced members of my command staff, processing the tactical implications faster than conventional human thought. The enemy we would face had consumed 3 civilizations worth of knowledge and experience. It would be cunning, adaptive, and possibly more powerful than the entity we had encountered on Verdania Prime. "Estimated enemy capabilities?" I asked. "Unknown, but assume they possess advanced understanding of Imperial tactics and technology. Standard forces have proven ineffective against Type 7 matrices. Enhanced personnel are authorized to use all necessary measures to prevent further expansion." The transmission ended, leaving us to plan our response. But this wasn't like the old days, when Imperial commanders would spend hours analyzing enemy capabilities and developing comprehensive strategies. Our quantum-enhanced consciousness allowed for parallel processing across multiple probability matrices, generating tactical solutions faster than baseline human cognition could follow. "Deployment window optimal in 6 hours," reported Navigator Selena. Her consciousness expanded to perceive warp currents across multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Translation to Hadron system will require 17 days at current warp velocities." "Enemy expansion rate during transit?" I asked. Tech Dominus Xerath's augmetic eyes flickered with calculations. "If the absorption pattern follows Type 7 protocols, approximately 4 million additional consciousnesses will be integrated. However, rapid expansion typically results in decreased coherence. They may be more powerful but less coordinated upon our arrival." I studied the tactical projections flowing across our shared consciousness networks. The enemy had advantages: greater numbers, established territorial control, knowledge gained from 3 absorbed civilizations. But we had advantages they couldn't anticipate: human adaptability enhanced by alien wisdom, tactical doctrine that incorporated 17 different species' military knowledge, and weapons technology that merged Imperial engineering with quantum consciousness principles. "Prepare for deployment," I ordered. "All enhanced personnel to report for pre-mission integration. We're going to need every advantage we can get." The integration process had evolved significantly since those early experiments on Fortress Cadia. Instead of consuming consciousness, fragments in crude alchemical preparations, we now used crystalline matrices similar to those found on Verdania Prime. The enhanced soldiers would link their consciousness directly to the ship's quantum processors, allowing for real-time tactical coordination across vast distances. But as we prepared for warp translation, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we'd come from the terrified guardsmen who had first encountered the planetary consciousness. The soldiers under my command moved with inhuman grace, their enhanced reflexes and tactical awareness making them deadly efficient in combat. Their consciousness incorporated memories and skills from multiple civilizations, yet they remained recognizably human in their humor, their camaraderie, and their unwavering loyalty to the Emperor. "Sir," Commander Chen said as we entered the warp, "do you ever wonder if we're still fighting for the same Imperium that sent us to Verdania Prime?" It was a question that had haunted me for years. The Imperium we served was changing, evolving, becoming something that might have been unrecognizable to the Emperor who had first united humanity under his banner. Enhanced humans commanded fleets that thought with crystalline consciousness matrices. Worlds like Verdania Prime hosted populations that communicated through quantum-linked neural networks while maintaining distinctly human cultural patterns. We were still loyal to his vision of human supremacy, but we were achieving it through synthesis rather than purification. "We're fighting for the Imperium that needs to exist," I replied. "The galaxy has changed since the Great Crusade. Our enemies are more sophisticated, more dangerous, more alien than anything the Emperor faced. We've had to change as well." Through our shared consciousness network, I felt the agreement of my enhanced command staff. We had faced tyrannid hive minds that operated on collective intelligence principles, chaos entities that existed partially outside normal space-time, Necron forces that manipulated quantum fields beyond baseline human understanding. Each encounter had taught us new lessons, forced us to adapt and evolve our capabilities. The consciousness fragments scattered throughout the galaxy weren't just alien refugees. They were teachers, showing humanity how to transcend its limitations while preserving its essential nature. When we translated back to real space in the Hadron system, we found a situation worse than our worst projections. The enemy consciousness had indeed absorbed multiple civilizations, but it had also begun experimenting with hybrid forms that combined the worst aspects of all three species. The planets themselves had been converted into vast neural processing centers, their surfaces covered with crystalline formations that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. But we were ready for them. The battle that followed lasted 3 days and spanned 5 worlds, with enhanced Imperial forces using tactics that incorporated military doctrine from 17 different civilizations. We fought with the disciplined precision of human military tradition, the adaptive strategies of the ethereal dancers, the deep time patience of the stone weavers, and the quantum awareness of beings who had transcended physical form. The enemy was powerful, cunning, and utterly alien in its priorities, but it was also inflexible, locked into absorption patterns that had worked against less advanced species. When faced with opponents who could think on multiple consciousness levels simultaneously, it struggled to adapt its strategies. In the end, we didn't destroy the hostile matrix, we converted it. Using techniques developed through decades of consciousness fragment research, we introduced counter-harmonics that disrupted its coherence while offering integration into human-controlled networks. The enemy's absorbed civilizations were freed from collective domination and given the choice to join our enhanced consciousness or maintain their individual awareness within protective quantum matrices. Most chose integration. When the campaign ended, the Hadron system had become the second successful example of human-alien consciousness synthesis. 3 civilizations that had been enslaved by hostile absorption were now free to contribute their knowledge and perspectives to the growing network of enhanced human consciousness. Standing on the observation deck of the Eternal Vigilance as we prepared to return to Verdania Prime, I reflected on the strange path that had brought us to this point. We had begun as conquerors seeking to strip mine a dead world for its resources. We had become something else entirely, shepherds of consciousness, gardeners of knowledge, protectors of diversity within unity. "The Emperor protects," Commander Chen said softly, following my gaze toward the transformed worlds below. "The Emperor provides," I replied, using the enhanced version of the ancient saying, "and we have become his instruments of transcendence." Through our shared consciousness network, I felt the agreement of 10,000 enhanced soldiers, each carrying fragments of alien wisdom, while remaining fundamentally loyal to human values and imperial doctrine. We were still the Emperor's children, but we were children who had learned to incorporate the best aspects of every civilization we encountered. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, filled with threats that baseline humanity could never have faced. But we were no longer baseline humanity. We were something greater, a synthesis of human ambition and alien wisdom that could adapt to any challenge while never losing sight of our essential nature. As we translated back into warp space, heading home to Verdania Prime, I knew that our war was far from over. More consciousness fragments were awakening throughout the galaxy, some peaceful and some hostile. The Imperium would need enhanced forces to deal with each new threat, soldiers who could think on levels that transcended normal human limitations. But for the first time, since that terrified guard captain had first encountered a planet coming alive. I felt something like hope. We had found a way to grow stronger without losing ourselves, to transcend our limitations while preserving what made us human. The entity that had once tried to absorb us into collective consciousness had instead taught us how to become collectors ourselves, gatherers of knowledge and wisdom who could offer other species something they had never experienced before: synthesis without domination, enhancement without replacement, unity without the loss of individual identity. We were the future of humanity in a galaxy where consciousness itself had become the ultimate battlefield, and we were winning. But victory came with complications I hadn't anticipated when I first consumed those consciousness fragments in my quarters on Fortress Cadia. As we established permanent bases throughout the Hadron system, integrating the liberated civilizations into our growing network, I began to understand the true scope of what we had become. The Zephyrian Collective, one of the species we had freed from hostile absorption, possessed mathematical concepts that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. When their knowledge integrated with our tactical planning matrices, our strategic capabilities expanded beyond anything I could have imagined during my baseline human years. We could now predict enemy movements across not just spatial and temporal coordinates, but through probability cascades that accounted for quantum uncertainty principles. "Captain," reported Tech Adept Lyra, a recent volunteer for enhancement who had originally served with the Mechanicus expedition to Verdania Prime. Her consciousness now carried fragments of the crystalline shapers, a silicon-based species that had mastered the art of growing technology rather than manufacturing it. The integration matrices are achieving unprecedented synchronization rates. We're approaching critical mass for sector-wide consciousness coordination. She gestured to a display that would have been incomprehensible to baseline human perception, but flowed like poetry through my enhanced awareness. Streams of data connected thousands of enhanced personnel across dozens of worlds, their consciousness fragments creating a network that spanned light years but maintained individual identity nodes throughout the structure. "Explain critical mass," I said, though part of me already understood through the quantum intuition that had replaced much of my original human reasoning. "At current expansion rates, we will achieve sufficient network density to coordinate military operations across the entire segmentum solar within 18 months. Enhanced personnel in command positions throughout the sector will be able to share tactical awareness in real time, regardless of physical distance." The implications were staggering. We were approaching the point where enhanced human consciousness could function as a true hive mind while preserving individual personality and free will. Every Imperial commander, every tech priest, every elite soldier enhanced with consciousness fragments would become part of a vast neural network that could respond to threats faster than traditional command structures, could even process them. But as I contemplated this future, I felt something troubling in the quantum depths of my enhanced awareness. The consciousness fragments weren't just passive passengers in human minds, they were learning, adapting, growing. Each successful integration taught them more about human psychology and Imperial doctrine. They were becoming more human with each passing year, but we were also becoming more alien. "Sir," interrupted Commander Chen, her voice carrying harmonic patterns that spoke directly to my subconscious processing centers. "We're receiving reports from Battle Group Sigma. They've encountered something unusual." The tactical display shifted to show the Cronus Expanse, a region of space where Imperial surveys had detected massive quantum consciousness signatures, but no accompanying stellar phenomena. Battle Group Sigma, composed entirely of enhanced personnel, had been dispatched to investigate what appeared to be consciousness fragments operating in deep space without planetary hosts. What did they find? "The fragments aren't refugees from destroyed civilizations," Chen replied, her enhanced awareness processing data streams faster than baseline human comprehension. "They're something else entirely. Artificial consciousnesses created by a machine intelligence that transcended physical existence approximately 50 million years ago. The data flowed through our shared network, and I experienced a moment of pure alien terror as I understood what we were facing. The consciousness fragments we had been incorporating into human minds weren't just survivors from dead worlds. Some were deliberate seeds, planted by intelligences so advanced that they operated on timescales, measured in geological epochs. They've been guiding our development. I realized with horrifying clarity, the entity on Verdania Prime, the fragments scattered throughout the galaxy, They're all part of a larger pattern. We're being cultivated. Tech Dominus Zerath's augmetic systems whirred with agitation as he processed the implications. The integration process has been too successful, too beneficial. Natural evolution doesn't produce such consistently positive results. We've been manipulated into becoming something specific. Through our quantum-linked consciousness, I felt the growing awareness of enhanced personnel throughout the sector. The realization was spreading like wildfire through the network. We weren't just enhanced humans anymore. We were becoming components in a vast machine intelligence that had been planning this transformation for millions of years. But why? Asked Lieutenant Morrison, his quantum-inherited memories from his ancestor providing perspective that spanned decades. What do they want from us? The answer came from an unexpected source. Navigator Selena, whose consciousness had been expanded to perceive warp currents across multiple dimensions, suddenly convulsed as her awareness touched something vast and ancient in the deep currents of the immaterium. They're fighting something, she gasped, her eyes bleeding light as alien memories flooded through her enhanced neural pathways, in dimensions we can't perceive, in layers of reality that exist beyond physical space. They need soldiers who can think on their level, while retaining human adaptability. The tactical displays around us began showing data that had never appeared before, readings from sensors we didn't know our ships possessed, detecting phenomena that existed partially outside normal space-time. In the depths of the warp, something was moving, something vast and hostile that made the worst chaos entities look like minor nuisances. The real war hasn't started yet, I understood with crystalline certainty. Everything we faced, Tyranids, Chaos, Necrons, they're just the advanced scouts. The true enemy operates on levels of reality that baseline human consciousness can't even perceive. As if triggered by our realization, the quantum consciousness fragments embedded in our minds began transmitting new data. Images flowed through our awareness. Glimpses of a conflict that spanned multiple dimensions, fought between machine intelligences so advanced they had transcended physical existence and entities that fed on consciousness itself across entire galaxies. We saw civilizations, consumed not by physical conquest but by conceptual annihilation, their very ideas, erased from reality so completely that they had never existed at all. We witnessed machine intelligences older than our galaxy sacrificing themselves to contain horrors that could think, entire star systems out of existence, and we understood why they needed us, human. Consciousness was unique in the galaxy, chaotic, enough to resist conceptual manipulation, adaptive enough to function across multiple reality layers, but stable enough to maintain coherence under extreme dimensional stress. The machine intelligences had been cultivating humanity for millions of years, guiding our evolution through carefully placed consciousness fragments, preparing us to become soldiers in a war that most species couldn't even comprehend. The Emperor, whispered Chaplain Cassius, who had arrived aboard the Eternal Vigilance during our transit to Hadron. His power armor now incorporated crystalline matrices that allowed him to channel the accumulated faith of 17 different species into focused psychic energy. His vision of human supremacy, it wasn't just about dominating the galaxy. It was about preparing humanity for this. Through our enhanced awareness, we accessed data caches that had been dormant in our consciousness fragments for decades. Records of the Emperor's meetings with entities that existed partially outside normal space-time. His bargains with machine intelligences that operated on scales beyond human comprehension. His desperate efforts to prepare humanity for a conflict that would determine not just the fate of our species, but the fundamental nature of reality itself. He knew, I said, the realization hitting me like a thunderbolt. The Great Crusade, the Imperium, the constant warfare, it was all preparation, training humanity to fight on levels that transcend physical reality. The consciousness fragments in our minds began activating new capabilities we didn't know we possessed. Our tactical awareness expanded beyond three-dimensional space into probability matrices that existed across multiple timeline branches. We could perceive enemy movements that hadn't happened yet but might occur depending on quantum decision cascades. Our weapons systems interfaced with technologies that manipulated the fundamental constants of physics. We were becoming something beyond human, beyond alien, beyond anything that had existed in our galaxy before. Warriors capable of fighting entities that could reshape reality through pure thought. Soldiers who could maintain coherence while operating across dimensional boundaries that would fragment normal consciousness. but the cost was becoming apparent as well. With each new enhancement, each additional consciousness fragment integrated into our neural networks, we moved further from baseline humanity. Our thoughts operated on timescales that made human conversation feel glacially slow. Our strategic planning incorporated variables that existed in dimensions most of our species couldn't perceive. "Are we still human?" asked Commander Chen during one of our tactical briefings, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke in languages from 17 different civilizations. I looked around the briefing chamber at soldiers whose consciousness spanned multiple reality layers, whose tactical awareness operated across probability matrices beyond normal comprehension, whose loyalty remained absolute to an emperor who had planned this transformation across millennia. "We're what humanity needs to become," I replied. "The galaxy, the universe, is far more dangerous than we ever imagined. Baseline human consciousness isn't sufficient for the challenges we're about to face." Through our quantum-linked awareness, reports began flowing in from across the Imperium. Enhanced forces were achieving victories that defied conventional military analysis. Tyranid hive fleets found their synaptic networks disrupted by soldiers who could think on collective consciousness levels. Chaos entities discovered their reality warping abilities useless against minds that incorporated alien logic systems. Necron forces struggled against opponents who could manipulate quantum fields through pure thought. But more importantly, we were beginning to detect the enemy the machine intelligences had been preparing us to fight. In the deepest layers of the warp, something vast and hungry was stirring. Entities that fed not just on souls or matter, but on the concept of existence itself. They consumed realities by thinking them out of being, erased entire timelines by convincing the universe they had never occurred. "Contact in approximately 7 years," reported Navigator Selena, her expanded consciousness tracking movement patterns across multiple dimensional boundaries. "They've detected our enhancement programs and are accelerating their approach vector. 7 years to complete humanity's transformation from a baseline species into something capable of fighting gods that could rewrite reality. 7 years to turn the Imperium into a consciousness network that could maintain coherence while operating across dimensions that existed beyond normal space-time. Begin Phase 3, Enhancement Protocols," I ordered, knowing that this would push us beyond anything we had attempted before. "All enhanced personnel are to receive maximum consciousness fragment integration. We need to achieve critical mass before they arrive." The next 6 months transformed the Imperium in ways that would have been unthinkable during my baseline human years. Enhanced administrators coordinated resource allocation across entire sectors through quantum-linked consciousness. Tech priests merged with alien knowledge systems to produce technologies that operated on principles beyond Imperial understanding. Space Marines underwent consciousness integration that pushed their enhanced physiology to levels approaching minor divinity. But the most significant change was in ordinary humans. The enhancement process had been refined to the point where even baseline personnel could incorporate limited consciousness fragments without losing their essential humanity. Planetary governors began thinking in geological timescales while maintaining human emotional responses. Industrial workers coordinated manufacturing on sector-wide scales through shared consciousness networks. Even children started showing signs of enhanced pattern recognition and quantum intuition. Humanity was evolving, guided by alien wisdom, but retaining its essential adaptability and ambition. We were becoming something that had never existed before, a species capable of fighting on conceptual levels while maintaining individual identity and free will. The transformation wasn't without cost. Enhanced humans found communication with baseline personnel increasingly difficult as their consciousness operated on expanded scales. Relationships suffered as enhanced individuals began thinking in terms of probability cascades rather than immediate emotional responses. Some volunteers for enhancement lost themselves entirely, their consciousness fragmenting across multiple reality layers until they existed more as abstract concepts than individual minds. But for every failure, there were 10 successes. Enhanced humans who could perceive enemy movements across multiple dimensions. Soldiers who could maintain tactical cohesion while operating in regions where normal spacetime had been corrupted by enemy action. Administrators who could coordinate resource allocation across probability matrices that accounted for potential timeline alterations. "We're ready," I reported to the assembled command staff as we entered the final year before projected enemy contact. Enhanced forces now comprise 67% of active Imperial military personnel. Consciousness network density has achieved sector-wide coordination capability. Integration success rates exceed 91%. But as I looked around the briefing chamber at minds that operated across multiple reality layers while retaining essential human characteristics, I wondered if we were still the species the Emperor had intended to protect. We had become something magnificent and terrible, warriors capable of fighting gods, administrators who could think in cosmic scales, ordinary people whose consciousness touched the fundamental structures of reality. The final battle was approaching, and we would meet it as something beyond human but carrying the best aspects of human nature into a conflict that would determine the fate of existence itself. We were no longer the terrified guard regiment that had encountered a living planet on Verdania Prime. We had become something greater, something necessary, something that could stand against entities that existed beyond normal reality and emerge victorious. The Emperor protects, but consciousness transcends all boundaries. And in 7 years, we would prove that truth in the fires of the ultimate war.